Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Deadpool and Wolverine. As the title says, there of course will be spoilers in the second half of this video, but I'll let you guys know when we get to that. As you can see, we have Deadpool and Wolverine. I should have put Deadpool here to actually go in order, but we have Deadpool. We have this very old Loot Crate figure that I have of Wolverine. Oddly enough, it's the only thing that I have. I'm waiting for the Wolverine, for anyone who collects like 6 scale figures. I'm waiting for that Hono figure to come in. I already like paid it off a while ago, and I'm like, come on. So if I had that, I would have had a very cool comic accurate Wolverine figure, but instead we have tiny, not exactly comic accurate, but we can get to some of that, but tiny adamantium Wolverine here. We also have Jamaican Spider-Man. That's just a thing from my little cousin from years ago, and I was like, I don't know where he got this, but Jamaican Spider-Man. So he's here for support. As the title also says, outside of the spoilers thing, this is my least favorite Deadpool. It really is. That doesn't mean it's bad. I would give it a 7 out of 10, which IGN also gave it, but they got lambasted for that. Granted, every time it comes up, too much water. It's always going to happen. Different people give different reviews, but it's under the IGN umbrella. And a lot of people pointed out they gave She-Hulk an 8 out of 10. Some people really like She-Hulk. I didn't like She-Hulk that much. I thought it was okay. I wouldn't have given it an 8 for sure. I probably would have given it like maybe a 6 personally. I really hated the ending. I was kind of enjoying more until like that last episode, and I was like, wow, they went like in the worst way, full fourth wall breaking, which is unfortunate because Deadpool does it and it's super fun. And She-Hulk is supposed to do it. They're the two characters that they both do it, and just in the show it just didn't work as much for her. Unfortunate, but we're not here to talk about She-Hulk. We're here to talk about the Merc with a Mouth, a man who is the best at what he does, but what he does is not very nice. And unfortunately, what he does that isn't very nice, I feel like didn't show up enough in this movie. I wish, action-wise, we got way more out of both characters, if I'm being totally honest. I'll get to some of the details, of course, in the spoilers, but the action was a big part of why this movie isn't as exciting to me as I was hoping for. It's not the only reason I would give it a 7 out of 10. It didn't knock off 3 whole points. There's other like actual plot stuff, and just like the length of the movie, you don't really feel it where it's like, oh, this movie feels long, but you feel the parts where it's like, this is one of those like quiet walking sequences or exploration moments where it feels like that could have been cut in half, where I'm like, you didn't like, cool, you built a set or something and they walk from point A to point B. But there are definitely some moments where I'm like, I feel like with the expanse of the journey that they took, you literally like, going from point to point, there are definitely some parts where I'm like, they could have just had some cuts and just been like, just get them from here to there. Cause what they added in between was like, this doesn't really do much. Like it just didn't happen, for me at least. It didn't happen to have a lot of stuff where I was like, it needed to have these extra moments. It was like some of this stuff I feel like could have just been like, it's one of those weird things where it's like a couple minutes here, maybe literally like a 1 minute sequence here, just little stuff to just like shrink it down like a tiny bit when they're doing like really like the second act journey of, traveling. So that was an issue for me, but the action was the thing that I would say disappointed me the most, simply due to the fact that I love the action from the first Deadpool movies. Love the opening to Deadpool 1. I thought it was a great sequence. I can go back and watch that at any point. Like, I think it's like, 10, 15 minutes, including the credits, all that stuff, all the action there. I really love that. The ending I thought was okay, but for me, when I think of the action sequences of Deadpool, I think of that very first one and him chasing people down. That I think is funnier, more than it is like just a great action sequence. I think that's like a funny action sequence, but I enjoy that. Same with Deadpool 2, like the opening sequence of that. The prisoner transport is the part where I really enjoy a lot. Spoilers for Deadpool 2 when you're watching this. But after X-Force kind of disappears, we'll say, all that stuff where, it's Deadpool versus Cable and then the Juggernaut. Granted, that was just like a surprise moment during that actual sequence. So that was really cool. But the actual action of that and like the comedy and everything kind of blending together, I really enjoyed. And this, I really loved 2 of the fights. And there's like 4 or 5 fights. And I really like enjoyed 2 of them. And the others, I was just like, huh. And there's some random things that a lot of people probably didn't think about as you're watching it. You're just like, okay, this is cool. I like this fight scene. This is interesting. And there's some stuff I thought of, especially I saw the movie on premiere night. I'm super late with my review, but I saw it on premiere night. So I've had some time to actually think about like, what was it that like really disappointed me? And there's like just little things that I thought about where I was like, huh, they literally just couldn't do that because they would have to like write it into the film. Some of the action that I was like, that makes sense if you have Wolverine in this movie, and it's kind of like, oh, you can't really do that because it would just require certain things. So talk about that in spoilers, but all in all, obviously it's ups and downs. Everybody's different. A lot of people have loved this movie. A lot of people, oddly enough, like the longer it's gone on, the more reviews I've seen where people are like, yeah, it was kind of okay. The story has that thing where it's like, it could have been a little bit shorter. It has, unfortunately, in the weirdest way, it has a villain issue. Once you see the movie, you'll probably understand what I mean by that, but it felt like it was definitely very succinct and like, okay, this is, it's following a really good path. Things are happening. It's like, yep. And then it happened. There's just a moment where things kind of twist, and it's like, that just felt oddly unnecessary. It felt like things kind of like came full circle and we're about to conclude. And then it was like, but what if we just do like an extra little branch off here? And it was like, well, I feel like that didn't need to happen. Like everything felt like it was better when it felt like, certain storylines had closed themselves off, and then the villains, the villain did what they did. So it's just like, oh, that seems like an odd change to have happen. And it affects like the last almost 30 minutes of the film, in all honesty. So it's just one of those weird things where it's like, that's an unfortunate, like, last second thing that just feels like an odd twist that switched things up at the end. But the story was definitely one of the issues. It doesn't feel as tight. It's certainly not nearly as important. As crazy as it is, as far as like, hey, it's the multiverse and this and that, is hardly involved with the MCU, which at this point, I'm sure a lot of people know, even if you haven't seen it. It doesn't do nearly as much where it's like, it's going to save the MCU. It's a Deadpool movie. They were like, hey, it's a part of the MCU, but it's a Deadpool movie. They aren't like, hey, here's some incursions. Here's this. Here's what Doctor Strange is doing. Here's what Mordo's doing. Remember that from like 16 years ago in the first Doctor Strange? Stuff like that. They're like, we aren't touching that. That's not really what we're doing. We're just a part of the MCU. So when they do talk about that with the multiverse and everything, they can grab Deadpool and be like, well, he's been here. He had his last movie, so he'll come back. But as far as this is concerned, it is Deadpool, it is Wolverine, and it is the multiverse. Mostly a lot of Fox stuff, which was super cool. So, of course, tons of cameos, things like that I really enjoyed. And I think that's really all I can say as far as non-spoilers go. So if you haven't seen the movie, I'm gonna get into official spoilers at this point. So definitely check it out. I think it's worth seeing. I don't think it's a bad movie. Like I said, 7 out of 10 as the third movie is not bad. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just like, I had some things that disappointed me. So full on spoilers from here on out. And we're gonna kick things off with my main disappointment, which was the action. The reason I don't think the action was as good, and this was like the minute thing that I didn't think about in the movie, but I've thought about it since, they couldn't have Wolverine actually like cut up Deadpool's costume because they'd have to have like a messed up costume through the whole movie. It would require a lot of extra CGI, this, that, and the other. But it took out a lot of what I would have liked to have seen from Wolverine, not to mention the fact that they don't have him cut up anybody through the entire effing movie. He only stabs people. Like when he fights Deadpool in that very first fight, he only stabs them. Like he probably cuts them somewhere where, you just can't even really tell anymore throughout the rest of the movie. But for the most part, it's just stab through, and that's really it. Like the entire time they fight, he stabs through them. And the coolest time that happened was in the second fight in the car, which I love that scene. I thought that was cool. I thought it was inventive, and I was like, all right, they're going around. Probably one of my favorite shots in the whole movie when he stabs his claw through Deadpool's head. I was like, I love that shot. Like, because I think he punched him at first and then he shoots it through his head. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. Visually, I just thought that was a great shot. And I was like, that I would like to see more, because even that we don't really see too much. I was like, oh, that was like straight through his brain. And then everything else is like, okay, you stab him in the chest or in the stomach and stuff. You see that a bit, but it was just like, okay, it's cool. And like I said, in the car fight, I enjoyed it a lot more. But in that very first one, as far as, first one being Deadpool versus Wolverine, in front of the Fox statue, I didn't like that fight. I thought it was weird that they had Wolverine do like the weird CG crawl thing. I've heard people say they like that. I was one of the people where I was like, Wolverine doesn't do that. There is no like cat person super speed crawl maneuver that Wolverine does, like a Wolverine where he gets on all fours. He doesn't actually do that. I'm sure that at some point someone else has done it, but that's not really his thing. Oddly enough, we know how Wolverine runs into a fight. He literally just runs with his claws out. That's what he does. He either does that or he does like the X, where he's basically, in a sense, he's kind of blocking bullets so they don't like hit him in the face and stuff. That's how he runs towards enemies. When he covers the gap, he either runs wide open because he's like, that's how invincible people fight. They just kind of fight with their arms up like, you can hurt me and it doesn't matter. Or he'll do a little bit of blocking and then he'll come in with like the open slash. And I was just like, he does not do an all four CG crawl sprint through the ground and like hyper speed move. Like that is not that's not a thing that Wolverine does. So I was just like, I don't like that, because that was just weird to me. And also didn't think the fight was that good. The very first one, I was like, there is some stuff that I enjoyed, but for the most part, I was just like, I don't think this is actually as cool as it's supposed to be for me. So I just didn't like it as much. Now to take it back a little bit, I love the opening sequence. The opening sequence where it was like the credits and stuff like that, absolutely loved it. It was hilarious. I thought the action was insanely cool because he was doing something inventive in a very desecrating manner with, speaking of adamantium, in a desecrating manner with Wolverine's corpse. But it was a cool action sequence. And, they did the slow motion and stuff like that, which was mostly for the credits, but they, there was definitely a lot of that, and definitely so many moments with it being slow motion that they definitely did like it's not 3D, but, if you saw it in 3D, it's like a coming right at you type of sequence. But I enjoyed all of that. And also, it was funny as well with the bye. dance number going on. That made it even better because I was like, I like the action. This is cool. And then when he actually started dancing, I was like, this is it. I was like, all right, we're off to a pretty good ride. And it was like, oh, that synergy of I like the action and the comedy's perfect because it's utterly stupid and ridiculous that he's doing the actual dance choreography for Bye Bye Bye. And then as it cuts back and forth between the dancing, the other stuff is him just brutally murdering people, which I feel like, and this is super crazy, after that point, that's another thing. It feels like it tones down a lot, despite, the R rating and them saying, dropping the F-bomb 100 million times, which I think is technically, was it like 100? There's that record. Guardians did it literally one time, and the other 142 times were all in Deadpool and Wolverine. But after that moment, I felt like it toned down a lot until they got to like that really big battle at the end of the movie. And mostly that was from Gambit, I would say, more than anything else, when he was hitting people with the cars and they showed him blowing up. Great sequence. I did love that. I'll definitely say I love that moment because I'm like, oh, there you go. Like, I'm sure there are a buttload of people who are like, Gambit, yeah, he charges cards and whatever. And it knocks people back. But it's like, no, there you go. Like, that's Gambit. So I thought that was cool because I'm sure a lot of people were like, oh, I didn't know Gambit could do that. It's like, Gambit is an Omega level mutant. He can do way more than you think. So can Iceman. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like Iceman is super overpowered, but you probably just won't see that very often in live action or even animated form. But same goes for Gambit, which they kind of showed if you watch X-Men 97. That was probably the closest example we ever got to him doing something utterly insane where it's like, yeah, he can supercharge this entire thing and almost make it into a nuke. Which also I thought about this when I watched that episode. I was like, that would have killed him too, because it blew up while it was impaled and I'm like, there would have been no body left over to cry over. But they had to have that moment. Sorry if that spoiled something for X-Men 97. I do apologize. But at this point, sorry if you're in that camp. But aside from that moment, some of the stuff they did with Gambit, I feel like there was just a surprising lack of blood from what I was expecting as far as just the action, especially on the side of Wolverine. I feel like Wolverine barely got anything when it comes to R-rated Wolverine stuff, where it's like Wolverine cuts people up. He will cut arms off. They cut legs off. They had X-23 do that for Juggernaut, where she like cut through his legs. So I was like, okay, like something like that. But I'm like, it's Wolverine. There's like a ridiculous amount of dismemberment with the adamantium claws that can cut through anything, minus other adamantium and like vibranium. That's it. Those are the two things. Everything else, the whole thing, it's a hot knife through butter. That's just how adamantium works. It goes through everything. It's like a lightsaber, which even lightsabers don't go through everything, but you know how it is. So I was a little disappointed. I was quite disappointed in that. I was like, man, the action specifically for Wolverine, I feel like never really reaches any level that I truly want, where it's like, here's something crazy, like he can't cut Deadpool. He can't mess his costume up the whole time. He doesn't really cut up a lot of other people. They probably had that at some point during like the pan where it was Deadpool and Wolverine fighting the Deadpool Corps. That was a hard one to watch as well, because it was like they were both in the scene at the same time, so you got to like jump back and forth, and I'm like, okay, like you try to get all of the action in the sequence, but they're also like right next to each other as well, so it's like you're trying to capture like everything visually on the screen, but it's just like, all right, I kind of got to look here and look there, and you kind of go back and forth, or you just stick with one person, but you want to try to capture as much as possible, so you kind of have to watch it twice. But it was definitely like, okay, this is cool. They run through them, and then they get to the bus, and then that's just like there's blood splatters and all that. But even that fight, I was like, and maybe it was because I was jumping back and forth, I couldn't really find anything that was like the most amazing thing. But also everything they did with that just felt like, okay, Wolverine kind of just looks like he's stabbing people a lot. Deadpool was doing like silly stuff where he'd flip over things and like he'd land in a funny way and then point the gun up and shoot somebody in the head and stuff like that. And I felt like Wolverine was just pushing people. They gave him straight up super strength. The Henry Cavill cameo, by the way, he had pure super strength. I was like, Wolverine cannot punch somebody and he just gets sent flying through a brick pillar. But I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. When he charged a car and he set off the airbags, I was like, okay, that one I could kind of believe, because he just he has adamantium. Like if he dropped on the car, it weighs a lot more than you would expect. So I was like, that one I could kind of see if he just like actually charged at it. But even then, I'm like, you'd still have to hit it extremely hard for it to really pop the airbag. But I'm like, they gave him straight up super strength, because there was one point where he was like pushing like 3 or 4 Deadpools, and I'm like, I know Wolverine's strong. I know Wolverine's the best at what he does, but what he does is not have super strength. So like they upped his strength like a lot in this movie, which I did not hate, in all honesty. Like the way they used it, I actually thought was pretty cool. But there's just a lot of stuff where I was like, I feel like he's pushing somebody, or he just stabs somebody a bunch, and he does this a lot. And I'm like, I like seeing that. It's a visceral thing. It looks better in the X-Men Origins, the video game, obviously not the movie, but it wasn't as cool as I was hoping for. And then Deadpool doesn't really have anything that's as cool to me, at least, that goes beyond the very first opening sequence where like his action is silly and over the top and he's moving around a lot. Once again, I would say during that final sequence, I'm sure it's in there with me jumping back and forth. I'm sure I missed probably half of it, but during that final sequence, I'm like, okay, I can see some of it there, but I was trying to see like 100 million things at once, it felt like. So I'm sure I missed some of that at the very end, but I definitely felt like the hardcore focus on like really showing these characters, like Wolverine should have had his own fight sequence. I honestly believe that there should have been a moment at some point where they either got separated or they just had like, you know, a cool showdown moment when they had like the giant thing where it was like, hey, here's Elektra and Blade and everybody, and they all go to like the final big battle. Gambit got his moment because they were like, you know, we got to show this off, and I certainly love that. Elektra and Blade got like a couple of things. Blade had like his cool boomerang blade. I was like, super cool. Great moment for that. Sadly, he didn't have his blade. I don't know if that was his actual sword. I don't know if that was a weird licensing thing or what the case was, but he had like the little machete, and I was just like, I wonder what the deal is with that, where he doesn't have like his iconic sword. So I thought that was interesting, just something I wanted to randomly point out there. But they had their moments and stuff, and even X-23 didn't really, personally, I feel like have like a crazy moment during that ending fight sequence, and I was just like, man, both Deadpool and Wolverine should have had like an epic one. I feel like Deadpool kind of got that enough, I'd say, in the credits. Maybe not enough because I would have liked it more, but he got that in the opening credits. I would have loved a scene from Wolverine where it was like he, you know, like show him like chopping somebody up, like get some fodder people out here and have him like just chop some heads off. It's an R-rated movie. He chopped Sabretooth's head off, which that was just a weird sequence as a whole. Like them even writing, like people have been waiting for this forever. Like nobody's been waiting for a millisecond to see you fight Sabretooth. Nobody cares. Not in the movies, at least. You know, in the comics, you want to talk R-rated, you give me Wolverine versus Sabretooth. That, you know, that's the day I'll be happy, because that's a crazy movie. That'll be bloody if they do it right. But this version of Sabretooth, nobody's waited for anything with him because he's never done anything. Whether it's the first movie version or even the X-Men Origins movie versions, like both versions, granted the one he kills in this movie does look closer to Sabretooth, but neither version has done anything relatively close to the absolute insanity that Sabretooth has done in the comics, especially like the last big thing that he did. Ridiculous. Like that man, that would almost be a horror movie if they made like a true R-rated version of what Sabretooth does in the comics when he's just full Sabretooth. That would basically be a horror movie. Like it might end up being like NC-17. Like you got to be an adult to see this, period. So I don't know, but I wish we got better action throughout the film. I'm just like, I love the opening title fight. I like the car fight. That was definitely, I'd say that might be my favorite. I don't know, maybe I think the credits are probably my favorite, and then the car fight was my second favorite. I enjoyed that a lot, but I wish there was better action. That's like a big gripe on me, but it's only because I think the action is done so well. It's not just like, oh, I just thought the action would be better. I feel like it's been better in the first two movies. That's why I was so excited for this. And I'm like, man, as long as I've been waiting, you know, we got like a hit of it in Logan, really, especially like at the very end of it. I'd been waiting for like 21 years for that movie to come out, where I was like, man, when is somebody gonna make an R-rated Wolverine movie? I'd love that. And I thought that for like 10 years before Logan finally came out. So, you know, we waited a long time for that, and we got to see a decent chunk of it. Obviously he was older, so he wasn't running and sprinting like crazy, but even in this I was like, I wish we got more. So that's it. Obviously I spent this much time talking about it. It was a huge gripe for me. I thought the action was so good in the first two movies. I was like, I can't wait to see how they do the inventive action. And it seemed like it started off that way, and then it just kind of disappeared as it went throughout. Also, the filming of it, I think, was probably another big issue with that. The choreography probably could have been there, and then the camera work wasn't as good, because during that big fight that they had, unless it was like only on one person, I feel like you didn't see anything, because it was like 100 people doing something, and it was like you kind of don't know where to focus. It was kind of the same, you know, like I said, with the ending fight with Deadpool and Wolverine doing the kind of the old boy thing where they're, you know, going in one direction. And so during that fight, I think it was, you know, some of the visual stuff, I think that was probably a part of the problem for that one. And then the first Deadpool v Wolverine, the CG thing just really killed it, and I was just like, I did not like that too much. And then the action itself, I didn't think was like over the top and insane, but that's my big thing as far as the action. That was like the number one thing I'd say. Would love to know your thoughts on the action, because like I said, that was my biggest gripe. So getting into some of the little things, I just felt like the story, like I said earlier, could have been shrunken down like a tiny bit. They even reference it like, you know, final stretch, folks, don't worry. I just felt like they could have shrunk it down like a little bit. And then the ending where Cassandra just comes back and she's like, well, I'm just gonna wipe out all this stuff because you tried to, you know, have me killed. I was like, dang, if she had just decided, all right, I'm gonna let them handle it instead of trying to get revenge and kill everybody, Because it seemed like it went to like a real leap where like the whole point of the movie was like, yo, I'm good here. I actually get to rule as I want to be. I don't want to take over other multiverses. Like I could. They say that they say that like a couple of times where it was like, thank God she doesn't want to get out because she could. And it was just like, okay, that was like her whole thing was that she didn't really care. So if she just let it go, or like even if they had a reference where she was just like, hey, just kill, even if they made a joke out of it, was like, hey, if you don't kill him, I'm gonna have to come out and do some bad stuff. And they're like, hey, don't worry, we don't like him. We'll kill him. Please stay over there. And she's like, all right, cool. It would have been a really silly thing to do, but I think it would have fit with like that last second turn where she's like, you know what? You know, like the little emotional beat that they had where it was like, wow, my brother actually ended up saving my life. How crazy is that? And, you know, to just make a joke out of it, like, you know, I let you guys go, but don't misinterpret that as I'm a good guy now. Like you kill him or I'm gonna have to do some bad stuff again. And then they just make a joke out of it and be like, all right, well, we got it covered. Please stay there. And that's how they cut that. And then they just go back to being like, we solved that villain problem. Let's deal with this other villain. And then it just seemed weird that she was just like, I'm just gonna kill everybody because this one dude did it. Like, why not just kill that one guy then? And instead of that, she just suddenly went from I'm perfectly happy where I am to I'm gonna kill everything solely because this one dude attacked me. And she just went from 0 to 100 when she literally didn't care at all. Could have left at any point to do that. And you obviously without the whatever the time machine was that they called it, even without that, she could have like wiped out the whole multiverse if she wanted to herself. And it's just like, that is odd. That's a very odd way to do it. It just seemed like it didn't make a lot of sense for her to be that mad to want to kill all timelines and all of existence because one dude did that, when her whole thing was like, yeah, I'm totally happy here. It's like, so were you happy? Because him doing that is just like, you know, hey, let me kill him and then I'm good, versus I'm gonna just kill everyone now because he did that. It just seemed weird. Like it didn't seem to really match up considering every single point that they made throughout the entire film where it's like, you know, I'm good here. I actually love being here. And it's like, well, now I'm just gonna kill everybody. It's like, what? For what? Like it's just him. Just kill the British dude. Like you don't have to. We're good. You know what you say fuck me for? You know, it's like we're fine. So I thought that was weird and it didn't make a ton of sense, but it did give us the Deadpool core. So that was cool. But yeah, I feel like that could have happened even without her. And in fact, it could have been the British guy who just brought them out to be like, hey, I'll release you if you guys take out these, you know, this Deadpool and this Wolverine. But it is what it is. And like I said, still enjoyed it overall, but that was definitely an issue that I had where it just seemed weird to kind of make that leap for her character, despite her as evil as she was. Like I said, they made a point to show that she was happy where she was at. Like I don't want to go to the other universes. Like I can be whatever I want and I'm the ruler here. I actually like that. I can be whatever I want to be. And then I just wipe out the other ones that don't really like me that much. It's pretty fun here. And then it's like, I'm gonna kill everybody though, because he stepped over the fence. It's like, we didn't step over the fence. That's him. We'll kill him for you. It's good. That's all they like. It just seemed weird, but like I said, that's just how it ended up going. It led to the action sequences that we got. It led to the very hilarious joke of Hugh Jackman, his clothes just bursting off at the very end of the film, just being insanely cut. And then it was just like just a silly sequence, which I loved. I do have to talk about the cowl. I didn't like it that much. It grew on me, you know, eventually your eyes adjust and it's like, okay, it's CG, but it's not horrible CG, except for the part after the bus. I hated that moment. And they have to come out and flat out say it. But they make a joke where it's like, oh, no one's going to remember anything other than the fact that I made that horrible landing. But I can tell you, the only thing I remember is looking at Wolverine in full CG, like an NPC just going like this and just on a loop. And I was like, what the F is that supposed to be? Why did they do that? So I don't know if that was meant to be a part of the joke, that clearly it was a horrible CG thing. And he's like, man, no one's going to remember anything other than the fact that I didn't, you know, stick the landing. But I'm like, I don't know, the joke's not good enough for me to be convinced, in all honesty, because even when they did the half CG where it was actually him, it didn't look that great anyway. And then they went full CG after the bus. I'm like, have him duck down and come up as the real Hugh. Like, that's what you do. Like, I don't know. They have to, like I said, they have to explain that is what the joke was for. And they made that bad CG on purpose to be like, oh, no one will pay attention to anything. So they have to say it, because otherwise I have to point that out, because I'm like, it could have been a part of the joke. It would be like a really deep joke to like hit it that way. But I was barely paying attention because like I heard everything he said, but my eyes were like, that Wolverine is horrible. So that definitely stood out to me. But the cowl made no sense. I thought he was gonna get it, and then they just did it at the end where he just was like, whoop, I have it. I'm like, the cowl is like a hard structured thing. Like they showed at the end of the movie where like it's sitting next to his mask on the table. I'm like, so he just had those fins were just like digging into his spine or something, because he was just like, whoop. and just had like the whole thing sticking out. And I was like, that's where that comes from. It was just furled up like that, and he just unrolled it like it was nothing. I'm like, that's a hard structure. You show that it's a hard structure. Like, even if it's flexible, it's not just cotton. It's like, it made no sense to me that that's how that worked. I was like, this is almost idiotic. I was like, they should have just made it where he got the cowl somewhere and picked it up. But I was like, that makes no sense. He just was like, whoop, and just pulled it out, and I was like, that doesn't work. But it is what it is. Still wish he had the shoulder pads. That's definitely a thing that was brought out, even with the original trailer. It was like, why'd they get rid of the shoulder pads when the official like classic Wolverine look would have been him in the cowl with no sleeves. Whoopsie. With no sleeves, but with the actual shoulder pads. So I don't know what the deal was with that. A lot of people mentioned stuff about Hugh Jackman like in the skin cancer and stuff. I think that was more for the sleeves though. So it doesn't really relate to the cowl, or not the cowl, but the shoulder pads. So I did think that was weird. It still looked cool. He still looked fine, but it definitely would have been like, man, what if he, had the shoulder pads on him? That would have been sick. So it was very unfortunate that didn't actually happen, where it's like, oh man, that would have been the coolest look. And if you don't believe me, look up the Hot Toys figure for this. If you don't know what Hot Toys is, just look up Hot Toys, Deadpool and Wolverine. You'll see the figure, because the figure you can actually pose with the cowl on, with the shoulder pads, and it shows you that it would have been a better look to just have the shoulder pads on. It's super weird that they didn't do it that way. So much of the action during that ending sequence of him having the cowl is CG anyway, as far as like the actual action of it all. And even if it wasn't, anything he would have done wouldn't have been so insane that 2 shoulder pads would have gotten his way. Like, they would have just rotated with his arm anyway. Like, there's nothing that the shoulder pads could have done that would have encumbered him from doing anything outside of even the end moment where they did like the when they jump out of the bus, like him having his arms all the way back and screaming. That literally was like a classic Wolverine shot. I was like, I can appreciate that, even though it's super CG. I was like, that is 100% like a Wolverine crazy like squat dive move, and I was like, that I absolutely thought looked amazing. But it was full CG. Like, they could have just put the shoulder pads move in a certain way, or you make them look like they moved, and it would have worked in that sense as well. So I don't know why they did it that way. I don't know if maybe there was other stuff that was a bit much that we just didn't get to see, as far as like action choreography that would have been encumbered because of the shoulder pads. But I don't really know. I'm definitely curious, like, what was the deal with it? Like, why did that end up happening? So I'm not sure what the case was there. Although maybe the car fight would have been the only time that actually would have happened, because they were in such close quarters. It probably would have done that, because he did a lot of stuff where it was specifically like this. But once again, they're still shoulder pads. They still would have just been like a little bit like on his face maybe, but at most, like, that's all it would have been. Like, it would have been pressing up against him. But I feel like it could have worked. But it is what it is. 7 out of 10 as far as I'm concerned. Would love to know your thoughts. It's definitely interesting to watch this one, where some people are like 1,000,000 out of 10 best Deadpool thing ever. Deadpool 2 still getting dumped on, but it's my favorite. But I would love to know your thoughts on all things Deadpool. Where does it rank as far as Deadpool and Wolverine against Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2? What do you guys think as far as what is going to happen? Is Wolverine going to be there as Hugh Jackman until he's 90? I think, like a lot of people said, I think they got him for 1 more, maybe 2, but 1 for sure. Like, we're going to get him. They're going to be like, hey, we're going to get everybody we can. Like, we might even see all the Spider-Man come back, because it's like, well, this is it. Once the multiverse thing is done, they're like, all right, the slate is here. Before, you got all your references, all the old characters, much like this movie, all the Fox characters and stuff like that. Like, you got that before, and then you have Secret Wars, and that is it. After that, everything is, this is who we're keeping that's old, this is who is new that's replacing all the old characters. So this is it. This is like our final couple of years with this version of the MCU. It's basically going to be a new MCU. Like, at this point, the MCU is done. Like, this universe will technically be over. So it will be done officially with the MCU at the end of Doomsday and then Secret War. So I'm excited for those. Very curious about the whole Doom thing. I was like, a lot of people was like, okay, I'm curious. But we'll get this version of Doom, and then we'll have like official Doom after, because it obviously won't be Robert Downey Jr. for like another 20 years doing a new universe version of Doom. So I'm very curious how they're going to do that. Do they already have someone after Robert Downey Jr.? Or are they still waiting for that? Because even that would be like another probably 10 years from now. But do they keep waiting again? Like, we get Doom for like half a second, and then we don't see Doom for another like 5 years or 10 years. A lot of questions for how they're going to do that. So they kind of had to have one for Secret Wars. But I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening. I'm very curious. I'm very excited for us to finally get there. I'm actually really looking forward to this new Captain America. I hope it really is a lot like Civil War or Winter Soldier, like they were saying. I want to see Red Hulk. I'm excited for where we're headed. We got Agatha all along as far as the TV shows. I guess I'm not that crazy about that, but I'm sure I'll watch it. It seems like it'll be funny. Hopefully it really is creepy, like they kind of show it. They're waiting until like October to really put it out. So I'm like, all right, if it's actually creepy, I might like it even more. I love horror, so if we can go down that route, they got there a little bit with some of the WandaVision stuff. Oddly enough, during like the Halloween episode, they actually did that. So if they can do that again, I'll be more than happy with Agatha all along. But we'll see what happens going forward. But I would love to know your thoughts on all things Deadpool and Wolverine, where this one ranks, where it ranks as far as, if you want to put all the MCU stuff together, where does Deadpool and Wolverine rank? Where does, even if you want to go back and include Deadpool 1 and 2, where do those rank for you amongst all the MCU films? But all in all, I want to know your thoughts on all things Wolverine, Deadpool, the future of the MCU, the changes coming to the MCU, and the end of the MCU. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.